What's up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of Part of the Problem. I am Dave Smith. He is Robbie the Fire Bernstein. My apologies for missing yesterday's show. I was a bit under the weather. Doing much better today, though, so we're right back at it. How you doing, Rob?
Doing well, and kids will do that to you. I've warned you, but your immune system between being on the road and having to deal with two little snot rags must be incredible.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna live to 130, but for now, it's yeah, having little kids does do that to you. But between, I don't know. Yes, I grew up in New York City. I've rode the subway my whole life. I worked the road as a comedian, and I have little kids. I've been working on my plan has been to just this is why I was good on lockdowns, Rob, because I was always just trying to get as many germs to have a stronger immune system. But yeah, there you go. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, couple of live dates, everybody. I got my Colorado run if you want to come ski with me or see me at Inga's Lounge for a Sunday afternoon day drinker. And then closing out the year with the New Year's show with Sam Tripoli. And then, of course, you got your wife's book.
Oh, yeah. That's a healthy hibernation, by the way. We had a little bit of a problem with way more demand than we were anticipating.
Oh, that's sick.
All those... Yeah. No, it's a good problem to have. But Healthy Hibernation is available still on Amazon. Okay, so there's a bunch of stuff I want to talk to. This is one of those days, sometimes we have, these shows where there's just a lot of stuff to get to. And then, of course, the timing of our last episode of the week, there's always the biggest gap between that and then the first episode of the next week. And then we missed yesterday's show, so there was a particularly big gap. So there's a lot of stuff to talk about. I do want to lead with an important correction from the last show that I really must make. What I said in our last episode, and I don't know, listen, I do not often do this, but I just got this wrong and thought I remembered reading something I didn't read. But I said a couple times in the last episode that Pollard was at the White House, and that was not right. I thought I had read that initially, and then I'd read a bunch of other articles, and then I went back and realized I just invented that in my own mind. So sorry about that, guys.
Brain fart, it happens.
Yeah, there you go.
The week after Skankfest, take news is 50% accurate before we return to our normal schedule.
Well, I tend to be a bit better than that, but yes, no, Pollard was not at the White House. Pollard, it was him and Huckabee meeting at the American embassy. Everything else in the rant, though, was spot on. It was really just that detail, but I should correct that. All right. I'm not quite sure where, I think we'll actually just start the episode with the Bari Weiss clip, because I just found this to be too damn fascinating. Rob, you had mentioned to me this morning that you were like, oh, we got to cover this Bari Weiss segment. And I had seen some clips from the whatever, it was like a Jewish leadership summit with her and Ben Shapiro and some other people, but I wasn't sure exactly what clip you were talking about. And then I went and I saw one. I was like, oh, is this the one? You were like, yep, that's it. And I was like, man, it's like every sentence I feel like we could have an entire episode responding to. We'll try to not make it that long and drawn out. But the reason why I found this so interesting, of course, is because, well, look, Bari Weiss is what are you really looking at here? I mean, I think this is a reasonable way to describe it, although I'm sure they would object to this. But if we're being fair here, you're looking at kind of the Israel lobby's arm in the new media. Like, I think this is kind of in a way what this meeting represents, and it's kind of interesting to hear their perspective and the tremendous disconnect between where they're at and where the rest of the country is. Anyway, there's just a lot of interesting stuff here, so I thought this would be worth us opening the show, playing, and responding to. So here is Bari Weiss giving her thoughts on the state of America and media.
All of us see the moment that we're in. And all of us see that the choices that it feels like we have sometimes, which is Hassan Piker and Tucker Carlson, or Nick Fuentes and, Andrew Tate, the kind of people that are rising in the podcast charts, those don't actually represent our values. And I don't think that they represent the values and the worldview of the vast majority of Americans. And so this is an opportunity to speak for the 75%, for the people that are on the center left and the center right that still believe in equality of opportunity, that still believe passionately in the American project, that still believe in all of the things that everyone in this room believes in, which is liberty and freedom and individual responsibility and in the most basic level, the right to know what is actually going on in the world, not
right,
the world as propagandists and ideologues.
Okay, so already I just found so much fascinating in that. And maybe I'd like to get your take on this too, Rob, because I just find this to be, first of all, there's an interesting, before we even get into the empty values that she's talking about at the end, and I must say I'm kind of jarred at someone saying the right to know what's actually going on. Like, man, does that right not presuppose quite a bit? First of all, there's no such thing as the right to know what's actually going on. And of course, this is like some crazy level of Orwellian newspeak where like, wait, what? Who is the dictator of what is actually going on? Who's the arbiter of what that really is? And how, if we have a right to really know what's going on, do we then have a right to not be misinformed about what's going on? And now who gets to make that, determination? All these things don't make any sense, really. All you could ever really have is like a marketplace of ideas and allow people to determine for themselves what they think is really going on. But there's this thing that people do. I've seen this tactic used quite a bit, where when people get very popular, whether it's any of the people she mentioned there, people have a tendency to say, well, that doesn't really represent, most people. Now, there might be some truth to that. There's I don't know if you remember, Rob, in 2016 when Trump was running in the primary, this was one of the big things that they'd keep saying is they would go, Donald Trump can't win against Hillary Clinton. He can't win. And he'd be up by double digits in the, he'd be taking 60% while the other 11 Republicans split the remaining 40%. But they'd all still say he's unelectable. And then Trump would fire back and he'd go, well, if I'm unelectable, then you're really unelectable because you're, like he said that to Ted Cruz at one point. If I'm unelectable, then you're really unelectable because you're 20 points behind me. Now, it is possible, by the way, that both those things could be true. Like, it is possible that Donald Trump could garner way more attention, or he could be way more favorable amongst Republican voters, but turn off independents and swing voters so much that it actually isn't the way to go, or something like that. But it seems like people just assert that without even an argument attached to the latter part. Like, I'm not saying that isn't possible, but the assumption would be, at least the default would be, well, if you're up 20 in the primary, you're probably more likely to win than the guy who's down 20 in the primary. Likewise, Bari Weiss could say, hey, Tucker Carlson, maybe Tucker Carlson gets, millions more views on his show than I do on any of my podcasts, but I think there's more people in the country who would be turned off by him than agree with him. Like, that could logically be true, but you'd have to have an argument for why you think that is, because the only numbers we're going based off here are showing that he's way more popular than you. Like, you know what I'm saying? So it's like a weird thing to deduce from the fact that he's way bigger than you and Ben Shapiro, that therefore he actually must be more unpopular. And I'm certainly not saying that the 75% that she's just pulling out of her ass and saying these are the people who will support us rather than you. It's not that I'm saying they all agree with Andrew Tate or Nick Fuentes or Tucker Carlson or Candace Owens or whoever. But the fact is that, and this is where I think there's like a real disconnect. And I say this really not in a hateful way, just to be clear. But like Rob, Bari Weiss is a Jewish lesbian. Now, there's nothing wrong with being a Jewish lesbian. I'm a libertarian. I believe in everybody's rights, and I'm a Jewish libertarian. I got nothing against Jewish people, and I believe lesbians have a right to be lesbians. But there is something a little funny to me about a Jewish lesbian explaining how you don't have the same values and priorities as us Americans. When you're like, what percentage of Americans actually share your values? Like, what percentage of Americans are represented by the Bari Weiss worldview of like, Loyalty to Israel is first and foremost what's important. Also, I'm a liberal lesbian who's against wokeism and kind of like honors the old tradition of the 90s. Like what percentage of people is this actually representing? Because it damn sure ain't 75%. And I think one of the things that these guys are figuring out, and they'll do anything except confront this reality, is that actually, like, look, Ben Shapiro and Bari Weiss and the rest of these commentators in the Israel lobby, they are animated by a support for Israel. Now, they will, if a non-Jewish person says this, they will say that that is an anti-Semitic slur, but it's also just undeniably true. Undeniably true. Like, they are animated by this cause, which is the Jewish state, which is located in historic Palestine halfway around the world. That is not true for 75% of the American people. And so, at least on the very basics of what you're talking about here, I actually don't think that most of the people are with you. That seems undeniably true. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is The Wellness Company. We've all heard the studies. Testosterone in young men is drastically decreasing every decade. One major study in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism found a healthy 22-year-old in 2000 had double the testosterone of a 22-year-old in 2025. So if you're in your 30s or 40s or 50s, you might want to check this out. Mars from The Wellness Company, a doctor-formulated nutraceutical designed to restore vitality without synthetic hormones or stimulants. Mars helps men to naturally increase testosterone, enhance circulation, and improve strength, focus, and sexual performance with Tongkat Ali, Tribulus, horny goatweed, yes, it's really called this, and zinc. This isn't about masculinity, it's about health. Low testosterone affects energy, motivation, fertility, muscle mass, mood, and future generations. So if you're looking for a boost, Mars will have you feeling like you are on another planet. Check them out at twc.health/problem and use the promo code PROBLEM to get 10% off plus free shipping. Again, that's twc.health/problem, promo code PROBLEM to get 10% off and free shipping. Level up your performance today. All right, let's get back into the show. Any thoughts you have, Rob?
I just hear pure censorship dribble and the same thing I've heard 1,000 times, which is, oh, everyone got the vaccine. I actually represent 75% of this country, right. And don't be fooled by how popular Joe Rogan or Tucker Carlson is.
Yep.
That's not actually what the marketplace wants, and that's why I just got this huge sum of money, and it's to produce the news that people actually want.
Right.
All right, fine. Don't do the censorship part and see how many people actually want your news and opinion, and if it's true that you actually represent 75% of this country. I just hear a pure new pitch for censorship of I actually am what everyone's looking for and I'm bringing them the honest news. Bullshit.
Well, also, like, and I get your point. Listen, I get your point. And look, if you wanted to be technical, because, like, I get what you're saying, I agree with you. But if you want to be technical, like, they're not actually calling for censorship. They're just making all of the noises and sounds you would make that would lead you to cause for censorship, which you know is always, like, in the cards. That's so I get your point, but also, like, just to your broad, like, if you just notice, right, me and you and let's say like me and you and Scott Horton and Clint Russell or whoever, like people in our camp, we're not holding press conferences discussing why our audience is evaporating and what needs to be done to force them back into the mix. Well, because we're not losing audience. Like these guys are doing this every day, it seems like.
Even if it's not direct censorship yet, even though she would love it. If she could shut down all these voices, she would absolutely turn that 100%. Trigger, and she wouldn't be like, no, we need free speech. The fact that she received, what was it, $130 million? I mean, if we were to actually look at the marketplace and what the value is based on the views that she was generating, she's not talking about, oh, I'm just going to continue to compete on YouTube and put my content up because I actually know that if more people can find me, I'm what they want to hear and I'm actually doing better news covers than anyone else. No, somehow somebody decided to spend $130 million to propagate your content because that's what they'd rather have people consuming. And so they're going to distort the market signals like what you're doing is more valuable and dump that much budget behind it.
Yeah, no, 100%. That's right. And there's it's amazing to see them. I mean, almost like I said, how many of these have we played here? I mean, I know I've seen them where it's all these constant, like they are discussing amongst themselves why they're losing so badly. And they come to the conclusion that actually they're not. Actually, we're not.
75% of America loves us. Go look at my YouTube
out,
numbers, and you can see that 75% of the country is clearly watching my content, and Tucker and everyone else is lying to you in their charts when they show you that they're actually have larger audiences.
Dude, we went over that poll on the show where it was they took it was like Americans polled like a week before or a couple weeks before October 7th to now, and it was plus 48% in favor of Israel on who you sympathize with, the Palestinians or the Israelis, and now it's +1 for Palestinians. Like you've witnessed a 50-point collapse in the polls amongst the American general public. The left has completely abandoned Israel. The right is on its way to doing that as well. The young people are like animated by hatred of Israel almost more than any other topic at this point. And yes, also in that same dynamic is demonstrated in the trends of who the popular commentators are. Then it's obvious for anyone to see that Tucker is ascendant, Nick Fuentes is ascendant, Candace Owens is ascendant. All types of commentators who are critical of Israel are bigger and more influential and more relevant than ever before. I'd throw myself in that category as well. Like, all of the indicators here are pointing to the fact that the American people are kind of sick and tired of supporting this foreign nation that costs us way more than it benefits the country in getting that support. And yet here she is to tell you that actually the case is that 75% of people agree with us. Can you produce one poll that demonstrates that? No, but she's just kind of asserting. And like, look, obviously, it is fairly reasonable to assert that, like, if most of the full population of this country, so, like including like the older generations, the ones removed from YouTube or the internet or whatever, if they saw like Andrew Tate or Nick Fuentes, yeah, a lot of them probably would be shocked by it and not agree with it at all. But that's not really the point. The point is that, like, yeah, these are the type of people who Gen Z are listening to now. Like, that's where they are. And then who's most popular amongst like Gen X? Okay, it's Tucker and Candace. And then who, like, the point is that all across the field, the Israel narrative is losing. That's just the world we live in. Like, I don't know why, it's like me and you didn't sit around in March and April and pretend that the entire country was against lockdowns in 2020. Like, you got to deal with the real world, even if people disagree with you. We've all been in that situation before. But so she does, there's a little bait and switch there where she'll go like, really, Andrew Tate, you think that's what most Americans support? And it's like, yeah, no one really ever made that claim, but that doesn't mean that 75% of the people are with Bari Weiss and Ben Shapiro. Now, does it? All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Rougette. If you've ever found yourself in that awkward situation where you're waiting to pick up a prescription from the pharmacy counter for an issue you'd rather not announce to the whole world, well, now meet Rougette Ready, the first ever ED treatment to prime the brain for arousal and boost blood flow at the same time. It works in as little as 15 minutes. It stays effective for up to 36 hours and addresses both the physical and mental aspects of ED, something traditional pills aren't able to deliver on. And getting Rougette is simple. The whole process is 100% online. You answer some questions. It gets reviewed by a doctor within 24 to 48 hours, and your prescription shows up at your door in discreet packaging within a week. No insurance companies, no awkward pharmacy encounters, and no runarounds. So if you're ready to give Rougette a try, get 15% off your order today by going to rougette.com/Dave. That's RUGIET.com/Dave and use the promo code Dave for 15% off your first order. Or you can simply click the link in the video description or scan the QR code on the screen to claim this offer. Again, that's rougette.com/Dave, promo code Dave for 15% off. All right, let's get back into the show. All right, let's keep playing from the clip.
imagine it to be, but what's actually going on in the world and in your community, so you can make decisions about where to send your kids to school, about where to live, and about how to vote. That used to just be normal, and the goal of what we're trying to do at CBS is to get back to that normalcy. And I feel incredibly energized and enthusiastic, because I think that is where the vast majority of Americans actually are.
Well, so that articulation of that set of goals to speak into the lives of the 75%, how are you going to do that? What's your strategy for success?
So I think one of the problems is a lot of people have tried to do centrist news. I know this because I am like the target audience for those things. And the reason that they have all failed is it's like trying to force feed spinach down someone's throat, right? It's felt very like tofu, oatmeal. It's like centrist news is choosing the midpoint between every single topic. It's felt like an absence of charisma and identity. And I, as nostalgic as people might be for an era in which 30 million Americans every night watch Walter Cronkite and saw him as the voice of truth, and I understand why they're nostalgic for that. We're not going back to that. So how do you build trust in a moment of unbelievably low trust in all of our public institutions, especially the mainstream press? I don't think it's by pretending like we can go back to having a view from nowhere. I think it's about who's in the room, right? I think it's about redrawing the lines of and acceptable American politics and culture. I don't mean that in like a censorious gatekeeping way. I mean having people that are clearly identifiably on the center left and on the center right in conversation with each other. And we've been doing so much of this at the Free Press. I was in, where was I? Chicago last week. I think I've lost all track of time, where Dana Lash, former spokeswoman from the NRA, was debating Alan Dershowitz on guns. Now, these are people that have wildly different opinions on the second, yet showing that they can have good faith, very passionate, very charismatic disagreement and still like each other at the end of the day. We think it's important. And so for me, it's always about the curation, like who's in the room, how are you showing centrist news, not as the absence of disagreement and the absence of charisma, but explicitly charismatic and disagreeable, and yet doing it in good faith. And the other way you do it is, by being really honest with.
Oh, you know what? It's literally, I think, just 2 seconds to the end. So let's just play the end, and then that you can go first.
Your audience, like.
Okay, yeah. I guess we really need that part. Go ahead, Rob.
Well, there's a couple things there. Firstly, she says she wants to play to the people in the room. So I guess you already have 75% of the audience. I guess 75% of the United States of America is already tuned into CBS. And so now you just have to continue giving them programming that they like. But what really captures me more is she's basically talking about, well, if we can limit conversations to fake disagreements between people that we already approve, so that people within a narrow lane will stay within that narrow lane, then that's how we're going to get a wider audience. Firstly, you're contradicting yourself of, oh, how am I going to reach this wider audience? You're proclaiming that they're already tuned in. And two is you are describing a kind of censorship worldview, where on CBS we're going to make sure that pre-approved characters stage fake fights over things within a narrow lane of what they're allowed to disagree upon.
Dude, Noam Chomsky had a line, and I'll probably butcher it, but it was a great line, where he was like, the way to have the way you manufacture consent is that you have a very limited like a very limited range of allowable topics, but then you allow for fierce debate within those limited, like the limited range. I mean, she's saying the exact same thing, in other words. Like she's literally just explaining exactly Chomsky's critique of the corporate media. And I mean, look, dude, it's just, I'm sorry, it is wild how delusional these people are, how totally disconnected from what's going on they are. And like, so she's asked, yeah, I mean, it's right, like Rob, like you said, like she's going, yes, the centrism, which means what? The establishment. It doesn't mean anything else. Like, what is it to be a centrist? Like, I don't know. It's like, as we've talked about a million times before, radicalism and centrism, they're all they're not objective terms. They're different depending on what society you live in. Like, if you're against slavery today, that makes you like a centrist, a very moderate position to take. But if you took that position in 1840, you were a radical. That was a radical position to take. So like, it's not the same position could go from being centrist to radical depending on what situation, what society, what time period, what culture you're in. So it doesn't really mean anything. All she's saying is, let's defend the establishment here by not letting anybody who's too far out of where I say is out of bounds into the conversation. She's completely removed from the fact that they're already in the conversation. They're much bigger than you. You're not in a position to disallow them in, which I think is why we all see this as a call for censorship, that it clearly is. But then her takeaway, because then the follow-up question is like, okay, but how do you do that? And here's the answer, Rob. We unleash the charisma and magnetism that is Dana Lash and sorry, and who? Alan Dershowitz. That's yes, the pure charisma of Alan Dershowitz will turn this all around. Here's I got an idea. Let's get Jeffrey Epstein's personal lawyer, who's on record getting a massage from an underage girl, but his defense was, I kept my underwear on. Let's get that 70-year-old who kept his underwear on as the pure face of charisma to bring this thing back together. You know, the thing, like, okay, obviously for all types of, for people who love the establishment, people who are supporters of the regime, broadly speaking, I know they all mourn the days of Walter Cronkite. She can't even help herself but to bring it up. Like, there used to be a time where, you know, she can say 30 million Americans listened to Walter Cronkite every day and knew that that was the truth. To me, all I hear when you say that is we used to have control of the conversation and we've lost control. Because the fact is that, like, what Walter Cronkite told you wasn't often the truth. In fact, a lot of times it was government propaganda. But yes, it is true that previous generations swallowed that without any questions. They're not doing that anymore. And she mentions that we're not going back to that. But why is that? Why is it that we're not going back to, see, it's kind of like when all these guys, like, I like to pick on Mark Levin for this, but I'm sure all of them are guilty in their own way of doing it. But it's like when they talk about why it is that support for Israel has plummeted, and they will tell you everything except for the obvious reason, like everything else. It's Qatari money, it's misinformation, it's disenfranchised young people, it's foreign influence of some other sort, everything except Israel just committed a genocide in 4K. We all watched it and we were forced to pay for it. That's actually the reason. That's actually like the core of the whole thing. And if you're not going to deal with that, you're kind of like, you're not even really beginning to think about what the actual you're not even having the conversation if you're pretending that's not what this is about. Likewise, like I said, what does centrism mean, and why is centrism dead? You know, and none of them will get to, like, they'll talk about everything else, but they won't go, oh, it's because centrism, in other words, the establishment, in other words, the regime, is Dick Cheney and George W. Bush and Bill Clinton and Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And they've handed us nothing but disaster. These are the people who bankrupted the United States of America, got us involved in a dozen wars of choice, killed millions of people, have destroyed our currency, have left our borders wide open, have locked the entire country down, and then forced an experimental jab into tens of millions of Americans. They got every single crisis wrong and got caught lying through their teeth about all of them. These are the people who brought you Russiagate and the lab leak theory was racist, and that Hunter Biden's tape was a Russian disinformation, or laptop was Russian disinformation, and a million lies later, a million crises that they created and then exacerbated and then lied through their fucking teeth to the American people about. And no one believes them anymore. No one believes them. Like, I know I use this example a lot, but it's like a marriage where you found out that your partner had been having multiple affairs for years and years and years. And then you're sitting there and you're going, what is the path forward to regaining trust in this marriage? A lot of people long for the days when we used to trust each other, but now we're in these new days. It's like, yeah, but you're not going to mention that part. You're not going to mention why it is that we went from there to here. Like, if you're not even mentioning that, how is there any hope that you could ever put this back together? And I would venture to say, Rob, I will go out on a limb here, and I will say that I do not think the phenomenon of support for Israel collapsing in this country, I do not think the phenomenon of people like Andrew Tate and Candace Owens and Nick Fuentes and Tucker Carlson and all of these guys blowing up, I do not think this is going to be reversed by a passionate debate between Dana Lash and Alan Dershowitz, Rob. I just don't think that's going to be the cure. But maybe I'm a pessimist.
I love it. When she says, I'm enthused, you're enthused by the paycheck and that you picked up the Charlie Kirk Israel money to go try and make propaganda for them, and good luck. We'll see how long this job lasts, and unless they actually do censor the internet, that there's no other place to get news information anymore, I give you 5 years before they realize you were a wasted investment, and then they try something else.
Yep, could not agree more. Look, man, like, you guys, you're much like with the old model, the Walter Cronkite model that you long for. Your entire control of the conversation, your voice existing at all is a function of censorship. It's a function of control. It's a function of, like, in other words, you guys do not have authentic grassroots support. The Bari Weiss is still here because, like you said, big money swooped in and paid a ridiculously overvalued price, and then she gets put into this position at CBS. She's not here, but say whatever you will about Candace Owens or whatever you will about Nick Fuentes, they are here for one reason only, because their audience loves them and wants to hear from them. And it's not the same for you guys. That's the fact. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is My Patriot Supply. I've been telling you about their Black Friday survival special. You have to check this out. Ever since COVID, I know millions of Americans are like me, and they've started buying preparedness supplies, especially emergency food. Now, most people buy emergency food, but there's a big mistake most people make with their emergency food supply. They don't have any way to cook it in a real emergency when the power is out or the grid is down. That's why our friends over at My Patriot Supply created their Black Friday survival special. It comes with a 4-week food supply plus $150 worth of free gifts, including everything you need to prepare your emergency meals, like a cook stove, fuel, a fire starter, plus a water purifier, a bug out bag, and more. It's the complete survival kit that your family needs to ride out natural disasters, civil unrest, or anything worse. It also makes a great Christmas gift. And it is only available through Black Friday. So head over to mypatriotsupply.com/problem to check out everything that's included. With all the uncertainty in this world, we simply can't afford to be unprepared. Once more, go to mypatriotsupply.com/problem and get prepared today. All right, let's get back into the show. All right, Rob, we got a few other topics that we got to get to here. Let's real quick, let's discuss Marjorie Taylor Greene, because this was a pretty interesting development. That is, I would go out on a limb and say there is obviously more to this story than we're being told. On the face of it, it just doesn't make sense. Obviously, Marjorie Taylor Greene she had really drawn some criticism from Donald Trump. She's been very critical of a lot of the failures of the administration, things that were all in line with being a MAGA American first, the lady that she always was. It's not, people are acting like she had some huge change, but I think she's essentially been the same lady who maybe woke up a little bit more about some details. But, she was very opposed to funding Israel's destruction of Gaza. She was opposed to the American strikes on Iran. And then she was a real thorn in the president's side about the Epstein bill, and was one of the people with Thomas Massey and Ro Khan and really championing the thing. So we know that, and Rob, add any other information if you feel like I'm leaving something out, but we know that while the press was on for this bill, this Epstein, the release the Epstein Files bill. So Donald Trump was adamantly opposed to this bill. He brings Marjorie Taylor Greene to the White House. They meet in the Situation Room, which seems like not the place that this meeting would take place. They meet in the Situation Room. They have a long meeting. She comes out, still supports the bill. He ends up flipping and supports the bill, signs it into law. So she has won. And then immediately after she wins, she resigns her seat and says essentially that she can't deal with like being attacked by Donald Trump or something like that anymore. I don't know. This is very bizarre. It's not too often that a congressman really goes to war with the president of their own political party. It's even rarer that they go to war on an issue and then win. And it's much rarer than that they go to war on an issue, win, and then resign in victory. What do you make of this?
They had something on her. I don't know what they had on her, but she was she put up a valiant fight, and she seemed to have been an honest actor. And obviously Trump didn't like her, and somebody sat down with her and made the right threat that she's like, all right, I'm done with this. Can't prove it. I mean, but that's the only read I have was she was a pusher and a fighter, and that's why she fought on these issues, and she was not just towing the party line. And then she turned around from a valiant fight and just went, all right, I'm resigning. And I don't believe that just Donald Trump not liking her finally got to her where she was like, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore. She just doesn't strike me like that personality.
Yeah. I mean, it seemed very strange because the official reasoning she gave was almost kind of like, it did seem like, well, I'm just a girl, like I can't be involved in a fight. But you're like, that is the opposite of everything I've ever seen out of Marjorie Taylor Greene. Like, what? I thought that was first of all, I was never convinced you were a girl. Second of all, you are clearly a fighter. I'm kidding, guys. But you know what I'm saying? Like, it didn't seem right that she was the chick who's now like a little shy for the big stage. That seems strange. Yeah,
she was like the Snooki of Congress. She was there for a fight. Like, that's if we were casting the show of the Real Housewives of Congress. We're like, all right, we need the spicy lady who's going to stir up some shit and call everyone out on their bullshit. Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Yeah, exactly. And, again, like you, I kind of have the same type of like inclination or speculation. But there is something about Marjorie Taylor Greene that is, I don't know, there's something kind of sad about it. Like, here's somebody who was a hardcore supporter of Donald Trump's from the very beginning. And really all she wanted was him to keep being what he had run on and what this whole thing was supposed to be about. And instead, he decides he's going to side with all the never Trumpers and the Israel lobby. And she was like, hey, that's bullshit, man. Like, we're supposed to be America first. And then to see her get essentially what feels like railroaded out of DC does just, it seems wrong. And I will tell you, it just, not that this obviously was already my view, but it just makes Thomas Massey's reelection to Congress that much more important, because otherwise, like, all the people who stood against him end up paying a price for it.
It's not good for freedom when every time there's opposition, the deep state seems to take them out. And so in this case, on this particular issue, the Epstein, she was legitimately representing the American people, and the deep state doesn't want that, and she had to go. With that said, I do think she made a fortune while she was in Congress. I think like 20 million in stock trades or something. So that might have even been the squeeze of where you're going to get the Nancy Pelosi treatment and you've got a longer career coming. And now she's retiring with her 20 million in addition to congressional pension. So I guess she made out all right personally. But I think for us as fans of freedom and like it when every once in a while you got an independent individual who's going to actually fight for a cause, it's not good when they seem to get pushed out of the job.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with that. It is, it's a real, it's a bad situation when the good guys constantly get punished and the bad guys constantly get rewarded. And those incentives are a real problem. Here, let's go to this video that I sent over, which was another a video of the same woman we had played yesterday. It's Sarah Hurwitz, who is a Obama speechwriter. She was on again a podcast recently, which I find it so. It is so, I cannot explain how gratifying it is that all of these people have to go to podcasts now to get like their thing out, and then they just have to do a podcast with way less of an audience than the rest of us who are calling their shit out for it. But it really is it's on a similar theme to the Bari Weiss thing. It really speaks to just like how disconnected these people are. How much they are starting with their conclusion that they're right and then working back from there. Like, obviously we're right. That's a given. So how do we maintain our control, and like never seem to like think to themselves, oh, maybe we're wrong about this. But it is interesting that she gets really into her defense of Israel here. And I thought there was something really like important about this to break down. So let's play a little bit of this clip and then me and you will discuss.
You have this chapter in the book called "My Search for Israel's Original Sin."
Mm-hmm.
So, can you talk a little bit about what is Israel's original sin and your and why you wanted to search for it?
So, my first book, I was talking to a Jewish communal leader, telling her about the chapters on ethics and God and Shabbat, on and on. And she looked at me and she said, "Uh-huh." And the chapter on Israel. And I had this long thing about, no, and it's distracting, la la la. And she looked at me and she goes, "Well, that's a cop-out." And the truth is it was. I felt a lot of anxiety about Israel. It seemed so complicated. And I hate to say this now, but I think on some deep level, I had a feeling that there was something probably fundamentally problematic about Israel's founding and existence that if I did enough research, I would discover and I would not be able to defend. And
that you would be part of the general agreement.
Exactly. Like I was actually, which is just, I'm so embarrassed by this now. It is such a painful thing to admit.
Sarah, this is what we're dealing with. I hear this all the time. So you're just saying it out loud from people who otherwise just say it quietly or in small, groups. As
I did the research, I was like, you know what Israel is, Dan? Okay, I'm going to say something shocking and wild. Brace yourself. It's a country. It's a country. It was founded like so many other countries in the mid-20th century. Countries founded in war, partition, bloodshed. I'm sorry, it's not pretty. I really wish it had, come about in unicorns and moonbeams. That would have been beautiful.
Can you pause already for a second?
A lot of nation creation came about.
Because I just find, I don't know why, Rob, but if you could probably see already what I find so fascinating about this, because there is this weird pivot, like in the middle here, where it's like, okay, you started by saying one thing. Now you're saying a completely different thing. Like she started by going like, look, I was kind of intimidated to even look into Israel because I knew I was going to find some things that I just couldn't justify that were going to be horrible. And I didn't want to find that. And I'm embarrassed to admit now, that was such a cop-out and that actually isn't true. And here's what I found, Rob. Israel's a country, just like every other country. Yes, was there partition and bloodshed and violence and all of these things? Sure, but like that's a country. That's how countries are founded. And I guess here's the big disconnect between that, right? Like that part, I kind of agree with the latter part of that, but like that is true. Like, listen, man, ethnic cleansing campaigns and terrorism and massacres and all types of bloodshed is how a whole lot of countries were founded. I guess the difference is that nobody else is defending that. Does that make sense? Like what, it's like, okay, everybody, I think pretty much everybody kind of knows, like if you were to say the original sin of America, you'd immediately go, okay, you're either talking about the Native Americans or the black slaves, right? Like one of those two things are the originals. Like we all kind of know that like there were Native Americans in America before Europeans got here. And we also know that a lot of those Native Americans met a very unfortunate fate. Nobody's exactly defending that today. You're going, look, this was something we kind of did wrong. We can admit that. We give Native Americans reservations and things like that. We give them citizenship. We get, okay, is it perfect? No, it's certainly not. Can we really justify like destroying their way of life? No, none of us really are trying to do that. Can we justify enslaving people? No, we recognize that that was wrong. And so there doesn't have to be this like, oh, I thought maybe there'd be this original sin. Turns out there's not. They're just like every other country. It's like, well, no, lots of other countries have original sins. The point is that we largely can admit that today and accept that, that did happen and that was wrong.
Stated a little bit differently. Let's say tomorrow morning I decided to pull a Peter Griffin, and I took my samurai sword out of my apartment and I slaughtered all my neighbors in my building. I recruited the other males in the building, and we took to the streets, and I decided I'm taking over Stanford, and I'm calling it Robbville, and it's a new country. Is this lady going to go on the news and be like, well, that's the way countries are founded? The guy wants to make a new country, and so he decided to slaughter all of his neighbors and then threaten the other young males into working with him and give them spoils of war. And, countries are made all the time. We have a whole history of a universe of new countries being created, and it's his right to go create a country. You're describing the worst thing ever. And so now you might want to turn around and go, all right, listen, a lot of countries had a terrible founding, but they're here and they exist, and it might be bad the way that they were created, but it has a right to exist because it's now here as an entity, and even that's fine. But now you got one really big distinction. They're still doing the bad thing, which makes it a big difference. Right? It's one thing if you go 100 years ago, they did something terrible, but now they're there and they've been living on the land for 100 years. And so that's what a country is. And so we're not going to take away the country for them. But when they're still killing the neighbors to, I guess, try and establish the country, the idea that you can't criticize that and go, well, it's amoral. It's no different than if I ran out with the sword and I would. Oh, country foundations. Listen, you're not allowed to slaughter and murder people, but if you're looking to found a new country, no one's going to get in your way. Then you can kill whoever you'd like.
Well, right. I mean, look, and I've said this so many times before. When it comes to like the founding of Israel, look, I mean, there's again, I don't think there's even a debate about this. Again, it always gets a little confusing because you have the tendency to say the Israelis when I'm talking about like 1944, 1945, 1946, but technically these aren't Israelis, right? Because Israel isn't created till 48. So the pre-Israelis, the Zionist settlers, the Zionist militia groups, the Irgun, the Stern Gang, the Haganah, they were terrorist organizations that committed multiple acts of terrorism in order, and explicitly said this, that in order to drive the British out. They embraced terrorism to drive out an occupying force, which just the irony of that can never be lost. But okay, so they embraced terrorism, then they committed multiple massacres, and there was an ethnic cleansing of about 750,000 Palestinians out of what is now Israel proper and into what is today considered the occupied territories, Palestine, as well as surrounding countries. There's a bunch in Egypt and Jordan and Lebanon, and then a bunch in the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and in Gaza. Okay. Now, are you denying that happened, or are you not denying that happened, right? Like, that's like first number one, because it first sounds like you're going, there was no original sin. Then you're going, it's a country just like other countries. She yada, yada, yadas, partition, and all of these things, right? What we're talking about is massacres, terrorism, and ethnic cleansing. That's what happened. And this is historically objective. So she's yada, yada, yadaing over this part to go, they're just like every other country. Now, there is some truth to that, Rob. There is some truth that it's like, hey, look, these bad things happened in the past. But the thing that I think almost every person, like I like to say, everyone on this side of the Enlightenment kind of agrees is, okay, number one, you don't yada yada over that. You don't go like, yeah, there was slavery, whatever. Lots of people had slavery. Let's move on. It's like, no, there was slavery and that was horrible. Okay? Like, you can just acknowledge that. But number two, of course, to your point, like I've always said, yeah, we could have gotten past that. In fact, I would say we'd be long past that if that's where it ended. The problem really comes in 67. The problem comes in 67 when Israel occupies Gaza and the West Bank, and they've occupied them ever since. That's the thing that makes it different. Like, it would be, I'm sorry, as everybody here could, I think, imagine, right? We recognize that atrocities were committed against the Native Americans. We also probably recognize that, like, Rob, I'd say, if you were reading about, let's say, a battle between like some Native American tribes and some Americans in 1820, you feel a little bit differently about that than you do if like some Native Americans today in 2025 just went out and started killing some people. You know what I mean? Like, it's a little like, well, the fight was still going on back then. There was violent resistance. But like, what happened is that we ended up giving them citizenship, giving them reservations, giving them all of these things. They can, right now, a Native American person alive today can, at least in theory, participate in society in the same way that any of us can. But let's say we hadn't given them that. And let's say we didn't let them off the reservations. Let's say we put them on the reservations, kept them without citizenship. And then, by the way, Rob, we also, let's add in on this, when we were met with violent resistance, we'd go in there and just mow the place down like every couple of years, just kill a whole bunch of them. Now, in that situation, if someone were to go, you know, I was looking for this original sin in America, and it's like, yeah, they took land from the Native Americans, but like, so did lots of other countries. Don't you see how disingenuous that starts to sound now? That's Israel. Oh, and by the way, let me also add in, we can't afford to do it by ourselves, and we have to get other countries to pay for us to oppress the Native Americans. Yeah, let's keep playing.
Out in the mid 20th century, in the wake of World Wars I and II, you know, countries were partitioned, divided up, and in ways that were, I think, problematic in many ways. You know, I'm not saying this is wonderful and great, but I think what struck me is that so often I think we educate our young people to think that Israel is exceptional. It's unlike any other nation, but it's actually completely unexceptional in its founding. And I think we have done a huge disservice to our young people when we have failed to educate them about how Israel is a country, and we have failed to normalize Israel for our young people. We have failed to say, like, here's a bunch of really unpleasant facts about how Israel was founded, and also those same facts apply to these other many, many countries. Let's go through those as well. You know, I wish every young person could understand that, yeah, there's some really tough, hard stuff in Israel's founding, as there was in the founding of many other countries at the time. And I think our tendency to exceptionalize Israel because we want our young people to fall in love with it, it really sets them up for failure once they hit college and they hear their first bad fact and they're like stunned. They can't get over it. And they kind of freak out and throw out the whole thing because they're immature. Right? That's what 18-year-olds do.
Oh,
they just kind of flip out, and there's plenty of support for them.
All right. So here's stated differently. We lie through our teeth and propagandize you that Israel's perfect. And then people come into contact with the other side of that story and they find out that you guys have been lying through your fucking teeth. Like, that's another way of saying the same thing. By the way, do you think, and I think this is something that really drives people crazy, particularly about Jews who defend Israel in this manner. And I think if you wanna look to why there is such a, what they call a rise in anti-Semitism, Rob, I think this is a major contributing factor, okay? Yeah, this woman is an Obama speechwriter. She's a liberal Jew. Ostensibly, in any other field, she would be committed to equal rights. She would be against genocide. She would be against ethnic cleansing. However, she carves out this one area where, like, my point is the double standard is obvious, right? Do you think for a second, if this woman was talking about slavery or Jim Crow or something like that, that she would say things like, yeah, look, that was not great. And yeah, you know, a lot of people, I guess maybe they had this expectation that America was perfect. And yeah, look, there's non-perfect stuff and they're not great, but there's a lot of countries, you know, and a lot of countries have had racism and have had, would she ever talk about America that way? Would you talk about any other country? Would you talk about any other like horrific chapter in human history with such kid gloves and always advocating on the, you know, like, and I just think that this double standard is like too obvious now to people. First of all, again, if you really want to play this game, then fine, but there's no way you come out of it winning. I mean, if you want to say, hey, look, we've been educating kids that Israel is exceptional and they're perfect and they're the most moral country in the world, when in fact, they're a country and that comes with all the messy business of being a country. Like, okay, all right, fine. Now, again, you have to ignore a whole lot of other stuff, like occupying your neighbors and keeping them stateless, citizenless people for 60 years. Actually, isn't that normal? There's not too many countries you could point to. There's none who we give financial aid to who do that. Like, what, I don't know, name me the example. What other Western society do we, like, that also gets to claim we're a democracy and we're like, that's actually not that normal. Israel has, in the last 2 years, Israel has destroyed Gaza. They have repeatedly attacked the West Bank. They have bombed Lebanon and Yemen and Syria and Iran. I feel like I'm missing one. But okay, that's like it's actually not that normal for a country to have attacked 6 or 7 of its neighbors in the last couple years. But I guess even more fundamental than that is, once you're saying Israel's a normal country, well, then what obviously follows, Rob? Well, then how come we don't treat them like a normal country? It's not normal to have your politicians worship another country above their own. It's not normal for you to give another country more foreign aid than any other country's ever received. It's not normal for the president of the United States to openly admit that his biggest donors are more loyal to Israel than they are to the United States of America. None of that is normal. So, like, I think if you want the defense of Israel to be like, hey, they're just a normal country, you got 2 major problems. Number 1, they're not. And number 2, we damn sure don't treat them like a normal country. I'm fine with that being like the compromise position. Let's treat Israel like a normal country. But then they got to start acting normal and we got to treat them like a normal country. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Kalshi. New York City's got a new mayor, but there's still a lot to bet on. What happens next is what keeps people up at night and what's got Kalshi's live markets absolutely on fire. Right now, you can trade on a whole bunch of things. Will the city council kill the mayor's first budget? Will migrant hotel contracts get extended past March 31st? There's a whole bunch of stuff on Kalshi. I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard on it. If you haven't heard of Kalshi already, it's a regulated market, it's cash settled, and it pays out the second the outcome is official. You can download the app or just go to Kalshi.com, fund your account, and start trading on the only poll that costs you money to be wrong and pays you money to be right. Place your wager and make sure you use our promo code PROBLEM. Move on from betting on sports and keep your eyes on real life with Kalshi.com. All right, let's get back into the show.
Obama's somewhere right now smoking a cigarette, having just got plowed out by Big Mike, going, bitch, it sounded better when I said it.
Yeah.
I'm sure he's like, why is my name affiliated with this loser?
Well, I just think there's like a lot, it's true with the Bari Weiss thing too. It's like these people come at this conversation with this, like, there is this air of superiority where they have kind of like, they have appointed themselves as the adult in the room to herd all of the children and to let you know, here's the problem with where the kids are. Here's what they need to learn. Here's what they need to consider. Where in reality, you guys are the ones with glaring holes in your logic. Like, that entire rant was incoherent. It started at one place, went to a complete contradiction, and then missed the entire point. And there is something that I think a lot, by the way, this is something that a lot of Jewish Zionists are guilty of doing, where they immediately, it's almost like it does seem to be this like superiority where they say, my role is to get in here and be the educator. I'm here to reel this thing back in. How about this? How about this radical idea? You're just an equal with all the people you're talking about. And if you believe that your ideas are correct and others are incorrect, then you have to roll up your sleeves, get into the conversation, take on the arguments that the opposing side is making, and defeat them. The thing is, you all know you can't do that. Like on some very fundamental level, you know that you cannot do that. And that's why instead you have to do this constant level of cope and endless, nonsense. All right. We only have a few minutes left. Let's talk Mamdani at the White House. Rob, this was I don't know. I don't even know what to say about this. You can go first, Rob. What are your thoughts on Mamdani having what seemed to be a very friendly meeting and then press conference with Donald Trump?
Mr. Smith, it pissed me all the way off, because if there's one thing we need, it's for Mamdani to fail spectacularly. You said it best on the show. To whatever extent he actually implements his socialist policies, that's the extent by which you will see failures. And the more he implements, the more failures that you'll see. And we need to educate the general public to, if this is what you want, this is what you're going to get. And so for Donald Trump to give it any sort of an endorsement in any way, or to try and buddy up, if there's ever been a thing to go, I want nothing to do with this, it's going to fail spectacularly, and you guys are going to learn a harsh lesson, this was the opportunity for it. But, Donald Trump, he's a democratic socialist himself, and he's like, oh, I've got an ally here. I've got another person who enjoys central planning. Let's be friends. And so he invites him into the Oval Office, and he wishes him well. And I can't think of a worse strategy for the Republicans than embracing this guy or any of what he stands for.
Yeah, it's look, Donald Trump had the Emir of Al-Qaeda at the White House earlier this year, or just I think a few weeks ago. So it's not the worst person he's had at the White House. And I wish that other one generated more outrage. But yeah, it's there's something about it too that just shows you how phony the whole thing is. It's like all the talk of how, according to Mamdani, I think Donald Trump is a fascist who's facilitating a genocide over the last 2 years, but he's quite happy to get the opportunity to go talk to him.
I saw him in a later interview, and they asked him about that again. He goes, I still stand by everything I said. And it's like, well, then you're a big joke. You just met with the guy and you were cool with him. So obviously you're either just lying or none of this is like, what is this big joke to you that you just say things that are completely not true, but then stand by them and don't operate in line with what you're saying?
Yeah, well, I think there is something about, particularly with big government and socialism in general, it's like there's always, whether intentionally or unintentionally, there's always a huge con game that's going on, because essentially you're running a campaign, you're promising a bunch of stuff that the government can't possibly deliver on. Just like you're promising that the government's going to make everybody's life better, and it can't possibly deliver on these promises. Never has, and it never will. And so you go in the first phase is promising the world. And that phase is easy, it's real easy to say, I'm going to make everything free, and you get to call out everybody else for their corruption while you brag about how you're going to make everything else free. But then there's the second part, which is delivering. And that part is much more difficult. And so you're watching Mamdani transition into the latter state. And it's just funny to me that it starts with a big hug and a kiss to Donald Trump. I would say for anybody who wants to see the country go in a positive direction, Donald Trump needs to just stay out of New York City's business. Don't be seen as putting your finger on the scale at all. Let him get done what he can get done, and let the result be what the result is. At this point, what else can you do? They voted for the guy. Obviously, the establishment made it much easier to vote for the guy by running such a terrible guy against him. But he won. And at this point, it's hard. It's hard to say, because I don't want to see my city degraded any more than it's already been. But at the same time, you do feel like on some level, all right, dude, give them free buses. And then see how much you love those free buses, which your taxes are going to go up for, which will be real. And let me make a wild prediction. They'll be worse than before. Like, you know, so like at some point you're like, you do have to have some of this. Like you have to get some of it and see how bad it is. Otherwise, what positive can come out of this? Last word to you, Rob, and then let's wrap up.
That's it, man. We'll be back tomorrow, I think, or Thursday.
Yep. Tomorrow, brand new episode tomorrow. See you then. Thanks for watching. Peace.